Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at 18 months of ownership of my Bolt EV. And when I picked up my Bolt, I was super excited. I thought this car has pretty good range, good charging rate, plenty of space. It would make living with an electric car pretty easy. But first, before we really get into the full review, I have over 16,600 miles on the car, 2 services, 2 trips to the dealership. The first one was for a software update, and the second one was for a software update to fix the first software update's mess up. Continuing on, there's a lot of great in the car, but it's not for everyone. First off, winter range. Most quote 40 to 60% of your range is lost due to the cold during winter. My personal experience in Wichita, that is pretty accurate. I've seen as low as 98 miles during the winter. That's a lot of preheating, preconditioning. The car, while I'm at work, I turn on the car before I walk out. My wife now almost broke up with me the first winter that we had the car because it was 17 degrees outside and we had to sit in Emporia for 3 hours, and it was just, here's the video later. 2 hours and 20 minutes to go from 47% to 71% on the battery. You gotta be kidding me. She's all excited.
Food!
Charge point sent to Google Maps. 91 miles.
I'm so cold that I'm shivering. I'm so cold. I got my nose drop thing broke and I can use them as chopsticks. I'm so cold that I'm shivering.
So made it to Olathe and 66.3 kilowatts used. That's that. This trip is not turning out as planned. We're spending the night in Kansas City. It's too cold. Whatever. Briar Cliff.
Tomato.
I don't know. I'm just driving here. Luckily on that trip, I introduced her to Fogo de Chao, Brazilian steakhouse. Really good. That made up for the horrible trip up to Kansas City. I wholeheartedly agree with her about traveling during the winter. It's horrible. 40 degrees and below. It gets really dicey about making it to Kansas City in one charge. So that brings me to my next thing, charging. Running around town, you don't really notice the charging rate because, well, you're running around town, you get over 300 miles. During the summer, during the winter, you're looking at still getting over 120 miles, and you're plugging in at night at the house. So you don't really notice it, but while traveling, you notice how slow the charging rate is. First off, relying on the infrastructure here in Kansas, it becomes greatly apparent that the infrastructure needs to grow substantially. So with the Bolt, running to Kansas City takes 3 to 4 hours, or Oklahoma City takes 3 hours. I've done it to OKC once. I did the speed limit. It still took me 3 hours to get there because I had to sit at the charger for longer, obviously. But it's down to, do I want to sit still at the charging station, or do I want to travel and then just sit for a little bit less at the charging station? You know, it's still a 3-hour trip down to Oklahoma City. Now, if you're an electric vehicle person, you know about Electrify America, and their charging network is increasing drastically throughout the United States, making it pretty much possible to travel. But don't get me started on that. Shit, you just got me started on Electrify America. So, Electrify America charges a $1 connection fee just to connect to the car, and then as of yesterday when I topped up the car some, it's 30 cents a minute. It was 35 cents a minute, so it's come down 5 cents, but it's still pretty expensive for the Bolt. The reason I say that is the Bolt charges at a max of 50 kilowatts. And that is typically between 20 and 50%. And you really, yeah, you get the full amount for that time span. But once you get over 50 kilowatts, it starts expending out. So when we are talking about traveling and the current infrastructure, we have to sit at the charging points for longer periods of time than is financially feasible. So it ends up costing more than a tank of gas in a Hyundai Elantra that I rented in Vegas that would get 500 miles to the tank. So on top of I'm getting 500 miles to the tank in the Elantra that I rented, it's only costing me roughly 15 bucks to fill up. The Electrify America charging stations, it's going to cost you $3 for every 10 minutes that you're there, plus the $1 connection fee. So let's just say it takes 70 minutes to fully charge the car, $22 to fill up your Bolt, and you're only going to get maybe 180, 190 miles out of it between charging points. It's going to cost you a lot more to go the same distance. Obviously, if the charging rate was higher and it didn't drop as drastically as it does as you're charging, it would cost you less. So that's honestly one of the biggest problems I have with traveling with the Bolt. It's a good regional car, it's not a good traveling car. Another factor that people complain about this car is the seats. They're either too narrow or they're too hard. They have that initial shock factor when you first buy the car, but either my ass is broken in or the seat's broken in, and I want to go with the seats broken in because I'm getting older. I don't think my rear end, really broke into the seat, but who knows. The seats do break in. They aren't really that big of a problem. The heated seats are amazing as the temperature gets colder outside. The heated steering wheel is amazing as it gets colder outside. It's just one of those, it's a livable factor that at first it might be a big issue, but the seats break in. So it's not really that big of an issue, at least to me. Brings me to a few good points about the car. The maintenance costs. Its costs I have experienced so far in 16,000 miles, almost 17,000 miles, is $40. It's been $20 for the lift, to put the car up on a lift, rotate tires, and another $20 for the cabin air filter, which the cabin air filter you change out at 15,000 miles. I will have a video shortly on how to change that out. Next positive, charging. I know I just complained about charging, but if you roll out Electrify America, a typical run to Kansas City costs me about $5 in gas. When I say that, that's how much it costs for me to fill up the Bolt when I'm in Kansas City. It's doing 420-ish miles there and back. So with that, $5 in Kansas City. I mean, you hit the first DCFC that you have in Olathe, and you can run around Kansas City for the rest of the day and charge at the different places that you go to. I mean, if you look up on PlugShare, Kansas City is just littered with level 2s, a lot of DCFCs. So there's that opportunity for you to be able to charge your car for a very short amount of time in Kansas City, just sitting still. I mean, even the first DCFC that you come to, it's hit or miss on if it's on. It's about 20% that I've actually been able to charge at that one, which is at the Starbucks near the Bass Pro. So if it's working, you can walk over to Bass Pro or walk into Starbucks, get you a nice cup of coffee if you're into that thing. I prefer Bang. So really, my complaint about charging is mainly with Electrify America and the cost with Electrify America. They have come down since I originally looked into it and have charged there, because honestly that's the only real DCFC we have in Wichita right now. And that brings me to my next positive thing: torque. Yeah, torque. What makes a car fun to drive? Horsepower? It does play a factor, but instant torque, low torque, and the RPM band of a typical ICE engine makes a car more fun to drive than having to spin the motor all the way up to 8,000 RPMs to get any kind of torque. But having the instant torque in an electric vehicle makes it so much more fun to drive than a typical 4-cylinder gas-sipping car like my wife's Nissan Versa Note. If you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to torque, test drive an electric vehicle. I mean, you don't have to buy one, test drive one, not a Leaf, even though they probably are a lot of fun to drive too, but I would not consider one since they do not have active thermal management, and your battery degradation is going to be through the roof compared to a Tesla or the Bolt or even the Kona. Which honestly, this brings me to my next point: cargo space. Cargo space is pretty important, and this car's got it. I've had to buy a fence post, an 8-foot 4x4 fence post, and I was able to close the hatch. Now, could have I put a passenger in here? No. I had the back seats folded down, the passenger seat all the way forward, and the post caddy corner, and it was up against the dash, but it fit. It's pretty important having cargo space, especially for somebody that doesn't have a truck. So this car's got it. It's good. I like it. It could have more though, especially when you have dogs and you also need your wife in the car too. It could have more. So this brings me to my final thoughts. The car is great for somebody that doesn't take a lot of road trips, because it's a great regional car during the summer and a great round town car during the winter. You can use it for running to Lowe's, Home Depot, Maynard's, and not have to worry about charging, doing your errands or anything around town. It's pretty great, even with little infrastructure in town. I honestly really enjoy driving the car, but it has its limitations, and that's really why I'm probably getting rid of it. Well, that's going to do it for this video. A few updates though real quick. The Saturn Sky is kind of sitting still. I'm still waiting on an adapter plate for the motor to transmission. Still waiting on my top, my fenders. Waiting on Axiom to get done with their control board so I can build the controller. And once all that starts falling into place, which honestly is probably next year, because Axiom's main guy, talked to him through email, told me that he's expecting their control board to be done sometime early next year. We all know how, development goes. A lot of times it gets pushed back. So until then, I either have to wait and save up money for a off-the-shelf commercial controller, or I can wait for that one and build it for you all, show you how to build one, show you how to set it up. I'd rather do that than buy one and show you how to set it up. Building one is a lot more fun, in my opinion. That's going to be on hold for a little bit, and we'll figure out something else to do. Maybe build a go-kart or something, or find a side-by-side and put a DC motor in it. Deuces.